Lab-grown meat is becoming big business and future forecasters believe it could be hitting supermarket shelves by the end of this year. They predict that we'll also have better access to domestic robots. But what laws and rules are in place to protect consumers? Futurist Dr Ben Hamer joins us. Good to have you with us again, Ben. Now, lab-grown meat, is it as it sounds?
Yeah, it kind of is. So lab-grown meat's otherwise called cell-cultivated meat, and basically you're taking cells from an animal and then you're turning that into a meat-based product. So it's pretty complicated, but if we think about pork as an example, what the researchers and scientists do, they'll take a sample from, say, a pig's ear, and then that pig keeps running around in the paddock, not harmed. And then through some technology that they have, biotechnology, they then grow that into a substitute for that meat. And it's said to look the same, taste the same, and feel the same in your mouth as well.
Do you have any idea how much it could cost? I mean, and do you think that the push towards this type of meat is due to the cost of living?
Look, it's definitely not because it's a cheaper alternative. So the first lab-grown meat product was a beef burger in the Netherlands in 2013, which cost over $300,000 to make. These days, it's on the market in Singapore and the United States, and it goes for about $56 a kilo there. So it is really expensive. It will come down as we see more of it on the market, but it's really being driven not by sort of the hip pocket, it's being driven by the environmental impact and for animal welfare reasons as well. So you don't need big farms to grow this meat. You don't use as much water. There's not as much as far as greenhouse gas emissions are concerned. And then, of course, we're not harming animals in the process.
And how does lab meat differ from 3D printed meat then, or even plant-based products?
Yeah, so we've had plant-based products on the market for a while now. So like Impossible Burgers or in Woolies or Coles, you might see Quorn, which uses soy as the base product. So they use plants to imitate meat, but they're of course not real meat. And then as far as 3D printing is concerned, that's more of the process rather than the product. So you could 3D print plant-based meat, or you could use lab-grown ingredients to 3D print cell-cultivated meat as well.
Now, as part of your future forecast for 2024, Ben, you also believe that we'll have better access to domestic robots. What will they look like and what will they be doing?
Yeah, look, it's kind of like a version of Rosie from the Jetsons, but a little bit different. So Neo is the first humanoid that's going to be hitting the market this year, they say in a couple of months. And a humanoid is someone that looks like a robot, or something I should say that looks like a robot. So 2 arms, 2 legs. But of course is not a human. And so what we're seeing with Neo weighs 30 kilos, can lift up to 20 kilos, has 4 hours of battery life, and can do things like cleaning, do the gardening, bring the shopping in, and a whole lot more. And so if you go on the website, it doesn't say how expensive it is. And as we know, if it doesn't have a price tag, then you know you probably can't afford it. But just like lab-grown meat, over time, the price will come down and we'll start to see Rosie from the Jetsons in our homes, cleaning in our schools and in our retail stores as well.
The mind boggles, Ben. We'll go to viewer comments. Dinesh Kottaswaran writes, meat doesn't grow in a lab. If it does, then it's not meat. What rules and regulations do you think should exist so that people do know exactly what they're eating?
Yeah, it's a really good question and a very real concern. It's still considered to be real meat in the sense that you're taking animal cells and turning it into meat. The process of that is obviously very different. In Australia, we have very strict rules and regulations, which is why it's not approved yet, but a company called Magic Valley has their application in. They're hoping it will be on the shelves in Australia by the end of 2024. And as an example, in the US, when they sell it, they have to call it cell-cultivated meat. That's the regulation there, so people know what it is that they're actually consuming.
Lucinda Gillett says, I'd eat naturally occurring bugs before I ate lab meat. Now, you told us earlier that it tastes like the real deal, it even feels like the real deal in your mouth. How is that possible?
Yeah, so they've been researching this, as I said, for over 10 years now. So they've put a lot of thought into how they can go about doing this. And so if you look at some videos online, they have blind taste tests of people who are tasting real meat compared to the cell-cultivated meat, and they can't tell the difference. So the mind boggles, as you said, but the technology is there to make it a very real possibility. And it's important that we do try and mimic the taste, the appearance, the texture, because that will really help with the uptake of this kind of product.
So then Jason Weeks asks, how would we know if we were already eating it?
Well, I think that the price comes into it. So, because it is so expensive, it's not like companies are looking to substitute this cell cultivated meat into their products, into their restaurants, into their packages, because it's going to cost them a hell of a lot more money. So, I think we can rest fairly safe, at least for the time being. While it's a lot more expensive, we won't be being duped as consumers.
Natalie Louise Rundell writes, we have enough chemicals, artificial additives in what we eat already. How can this even be good for us? And Joanne Abbott asks, if it has hormones to make it grow in a lab, won't those same hormones affect people?
Well, it's a bit of a catch-22 because we hear about how there's a lot of hormones that are used to raise and rear animals already. And interestingly, when you look at some of the research behind this, they argue that there could be less hormones or less additives because, as an example, a lot of animals, when they're in farms, they're given antibiotics to prevent diseases, and that's not being given to the cell-cultivated meat. So they're saying the hormone levels and the composition is relatively similar, but potentially with less chemicals, believe it or not.
Your foresights keep us on our toes, Ben. Dr. Hamer, until next time.
Thanks, Mom.